Board Game Academics podcast, where we explore the crossroads of scholarship, play, and practice. I'm your host, Christopher Carbone, scholar, educator, and of course, lifelong gamer. Each week this semester, we discuss with brilliant minds how analog games inform real-world practice, support meaningful change, and challenge us to think critically, whether in the classroom, clinics, communities, or beyond. This week, I'm joined by
Andrew Buchmann, Senior Academic Success Advisor at the State University of New York at Oswego.
Hey there, David Runge, also an Academic Success Advisor at State University of New York, Oswego.
And my name is Sean Milligan, also an Academic Success Advisor at SUNY Oswego.
Well, thank you all for joining us here this week. We appreciate you all coming back. And we have so much to talk about in relation to your scholarship and the work that you do with students at the university level. But before we do all of that kind of fun stuff, let's talk about the stuff that people really want to know about. Tabletop gaming, analog gaming, games that you love. They can be video games. We will allow it. Is there a game or game system that you're really into? Do you have a favorite, game that you play with your students, or something you play with your family, or just like your number one game of all time?
Well, I'll start off on the tabletop front. A big one right now, as the resident Star Wars nerd and scholar, I guess, for our campus.
Nice.
Star Wars Outer Rim is the big game that we play, especially in my Star Wars game night that I host each fall semester. But the other thing that I've been doing, which runs my life, is Disney Lorcana. Not quite the board game, but a TCG trading card game. I'm competing in competitions every weekend, it almost seems, at this point in time. So that's what runs most of my life outside of academia.
Yeah, if I had to mention maybe what I'm really into right now, I've been into it for a while. It's got to be Dungeons and Dragons. I know that's the simple one, the one with the high name recognition. Playing it weekly with friends. I have been incorporating it into a lot of things I've been doing professionally and hobbies as well. It's the go-to. It's fun. There's so much opportunity there, which is really exciting. I'll give a quick shout out as well, though. If my daughter happens to listen to this, 5-year-old, but she is a big fan of Memory Mash, the little old game where you just flip the cards over, and she beats me pretty much every time. And I do not let her win. She legitimately destroys me.
And I'm a big fan of chunky, systems heavy, like dungeon crawlers, like Descent, Hero Quest from the 80s. But honestly, what I play the most of that brings me the most joy is like games that get people laughing, like party games, Concept, Werewolf, Dixit, King of Tokyo, different things like that that are kind of simple, easy to get into, and everyone just has a good time and laughs around the table. So,
Well, that's fantastic. A real broad diversity of games across the three of you. So tell us a little bit and how that came together as far as like your love and enjoyment of tabletop gaming into your scholarship and into your practical work with students, specifically your scholarship that you produce for our second journal.
I think, all three of us work within the Advisement Center at SUNY Oswego. And you very quickly, when you're three men working in a predominantly, a field of mostly women, where you're going to connect on your interests and your hobbies. And all three of us are proud nerds. And so very quickly we learned that, we all tend to like the same sorts of things. And, you like Dungeons and Dragons? Well, I like Dungeons and Dragons. And also at the same time, we're also trying to think of, what are the different ways in which we can approach our students and the work we do and make them more excited about learning. And inevitably, I think that came to these things coming together to produce the paper that we wrote for BGA and our continued work using tabletop gaming as a way to, make learning more effective or more engaging for students. So kind of a tale of just, three guys who happen to share similar interests coming together and doing some great work.
Give us a shout out for that. What's the name of the paper?
Oh yeah, what is the name of our paper? It's a good one.
It was a critical role. That was the name. So we're playing off the popular live play and everything, but really touching on a class, right? And so this is what we looked at here.
Yes.
Where I'll give credit to Andrew and Sean. They were the ones who started the genesis of this. But in our role as academic advisors, we help teach a class. It's EDU 104. It's at SUNY Oswego, where it's functionally a success strategies and skills-based course for students who struggled academically, who are on academic probation. And we had noticed a problem that this course that was designed to help them oftentimes would feature low attendance rates, low participation rates, and that's not going to then help those students successfully. So we got together and said, well, what can we do to change it up, to switch it up? And it began a big discussion on, well, can we tap into our love of games, of active participation and engagement, and can we infuse that in some way into the class? So the three of us got together, we brainstormed with other colleagues as well, bounced around a couple of different ideas. Do we want to make a board game? Is it like a game of life type thing? Do we just gamify some elements of the class or even like the syllabus? But after a lot of discussion, prep, and plan, we ended up functionally turning a game into a kind of a half D&D game alongside classroom things that we were teaching. So trying to apply those classroom concepts with Sean being the primary instructor for the semester where we taught half D&D, half learning the concepts.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah, and I don't really know if I have too much to add to that. I think Andrew and David did a good job describing kind of our class and our
He added
goals.
just enough for us.
And that's really and that, you know, brevity, right? That's really what we have to get to, as far as, especially when you're working with students and they do have such limited kind of focus capacity. A lot of other things are going on in their lives, and you come in as a faculty member, instructor in that kind of position and role, and you're like, hey, you should know all this stuff. And they're just like, I'm getting hit by all of this stuff all the time by literally everybody that I meet. And I'm like 18 years old and I just got here. And as advisors, as instructors, we're trying to make this consumable, but also on some level that they'll assimilate it so that they, you know, later on and throughout their college career, they'll benefit from it. So there's a lot of very extremely important lessons. So it seems like using tabletop gaming has brought more people to the table, so to speak, and helped them kind of really integrate that knowledge in a more beneficial way, at the, you know, while they're dealing with the deluge of everything else that's happening.
Yeah, definitely. And I encourage anyone who hasn't had a chance yet to take a look at the paper, but just to even give an example of how we apply some of these concepts here. You know, we saw our students who face struggles and setbacks and challenges, right? Academic falling behind. So we had Sean, you know, taught about, okay, well, what do you do in terms of things like growth mindset versus fixed mindset? How do you pick yourself back up if you're having difficulty with the challenges? We would teach that lesson, and then on what we called a gameplay day, we split it with a twice a week meeting class, 1 day of learning, 1 day of play. We had them walk through a series of battle challenges where, okay, the first one's kind of easy. You know, you can breeze through that one. Maybe that's that start of the semester easy quiz, easy test, right? Then we had them do a battle challenge that was a little tougher. They might have taken a couple of licks, but they were fine. And maybe that was a grade that wasn't my best grade, but I passed. I did what I needed to do. And then we intentionally bumped it up to basically, you know, a total party kill, right? Where, okay, sometimes you're going to get hit with something really, really hard. You're going to have that test you don't do well on. We have 3 essays due in a week, and you're trying to keep your head above water. And it's not about the fact that you got knocked down, but okay, how are you now going to get back up, right? To use that classic phrase there. And the goal was then to teach these lessons, but then for also in some ways to see it in action, and see it in action in a very immersive way so they can really connect and engage with that. And I think that's where especially a role-playing game, a tabletop game like that, gives you a chance to have that immersive experience that hopefully will resonate and connect with you. And we really saw both through the things that the students shared, but also through our own observations with each of us being in the class, the students were connecting with them. They were excited to participate. Sean, I remember one of the comments you made, if you want to talk a little bit more about this, is that how sometimes they forgot their pencils, but they never forgot their dice, which was really a cool experience.
Yeah, that's just a universal experience teaching college classes, but this population in particular, students on academic probation, not being prepared with their class materials, not bringing the most basic things you need to succeed in a college class, paper, pens, notebooks, but they would always bring their dice. And so that, I think, shows that they were bought into the gamification aspect. So yeah, that's just one. It might seem like a little thing that they always brought their dice so that they were ready to roll, ready to play, but I think it spoke to how engaged they were.
And I think that concept of ready to roll, ready to play kind of situation, again, we're teaching lessons beyond the content. We're teaching practical engagement lessons in a professional environment, because a lot of students, again, they're 18 to 20 years old and they're coming in, whether they came in as freshmen or they transferred in. And this is a very new environment. It's not new to us, and we make a lot of assumptions as staff and people work with students that like they should know these things, they should understand these things, but like we forget, coming from high school, we're almost like embittered by that kind of like rigid kind of experience. And then they get to college and it's like, well, now we're not going to be like on top of you. So what happens then? And then there's that kind of like tightness to that looseness, and it just happens immediately when they get to college. So now they have to start thinking about, what do I have to do to be successful, instead of like trying to meet other people's expectations. So what do I need? What do I need? How do I need to gear up? How do I need to position myself? How do I need to act in these kind of ways? The D&D is kind of a really, helps let the medicine go down with a little bit of sugar in that case.
And we saw that firsthand. One of the first lessons that we teach, at least in the section that I ran, is on this comparison between what it's like in high school and what it's like in college. So you get to compare and contrast, what's similar and how, yep, you've got classes, and probably as a first year student, you're likely taking, at least our institution, a lot of general education courses. So it might seem very similar. You're taking a history, maybe a math, maybe a science, maybe some kind of social science, an English class. So it's very similar in that way, but radically different in many other sorts of ways. But what was really cool about our course with this D&D element is not only are we then going to compare and contrast with our past and what high school was like, but we're going to compare and contrast with our future, the things that we're learning in this class, and then how we're experiencing those things through the D&D play. So what we really tried to encourage students to do is like, yes, this is a fantastical world we're creating, the Oswego Wildlands. And our president has been turned into an evil wizard who was actually kidnapped. And that was kind of the goal at the end, was to save our president.
Yeah.
And so that fantastical element. But at the same time, it was applying these real world concepts of things like growth mindset, or the fear of failure and how we overcome it, and effective learning strategies, which, you might not think is something that you can do within a D&D session. But one activity what we really enjoyed doing was like puzzles with the students. So a cognitively engaging process. And in the case of my section, I would sprinkle in clues that were related to the topic discussed that week. So even if it wasn't a one-to-one correlation of this concept is being directly applied through D&D, at the very least in the D&D gameplay, they had to think about those concepts to complete the puzzle in order to move on to, the next part of the story.
Sure. And I think a lot of that is to the benefit of tabletop role-playing games that allows for that character bleed, right? And now that role that which you're playing becomes part of who you are, and you can engage in those kind of practices, which are very anxiety producing in the everyday world in which we live, because it's got a sheen of like mythological fantasy kind of vibe to it. And now it's not so scary to like have to deal with the anxiety and the powers and the challenges throughout. And now when I go on to my next class, maybe some of that character lingers with me, so that I'm able to take that in there. Maybe I do have the dice in my pocket. Well, I'm not rolling them to deal with, a faculty member necessarily, but I know like how to deal with that situation, because I dealt with this high orc who was giving me a hard time, and I had to, try to get past the bridge or something like that. So I learned something. I didn't know I learned something, but I learned something.
Yeah, and even if it's one of those small things, Chris, as you were saying there, where you start to get a little exposure, you start to get a little experience, and we always try to encourage, okay, when you're playing this game, you're you, but you're also not you. You're that character in that moment. So when we talked to, Andrew mentioned a second ago, that puzzle mission, right? And
Yes.
We've adapted this kind of gameplay style to a couple of different classes now. The first time we ran it, we did it in a fishbowl classroom style. So we had 4 or 5 students playing, students observing on the outside as well. So we told them, okay, if you get stuck with your puzzle, talk to your peers. And we're maybe hoping to teach them a lesson that if you're in a class, maybe you talk to other students in the class and you study together, you work together. We gave them hints that if the 4 of you really get stuck, the people who aren't playing right now, who are observing that fishbowl, they can be the spirits of the forest. And maybe you can almost like phone a friend to them. So that's using your campus resource. Maybe you go to the tutoring center. Maybe you talk to the DM. You talk to the instructor. And each of those are opportunities. And hopefully in them seeing, hey, that worked out. I actually was able to overcome that challenge by using my resource. I've taken away a little bit of that initial barrier of this was a little scary and I didn't want to do it. And even if it's playing a silly game, well, it worked this time, maybe it'll work in those other situations as well. And that was really one of the goals. Give them exposure, immerse them, and help to reinforce. They're learning this from a lecture or academic assignments, especially when Sean taught it that first time. Andrew did it in a section of his class as well. Now you're playing the game, you're seeing it in action, and
Yes.
now bring it to your other classes and see how it really works.
And I think from the colleges and universities that I've worked at, and it might be similar at Oswego, the biggest challenges that students report to us typically is self-isolation. They come to a college, university, especially if they live on campus, and there is this ideal that they're going to like enter a world of like just infinite numbers of friendships and everything's going to kind of work. And then they get there, and because of a lot of the, as all digital natives, right? You're used to your phone, you're used to ordering things, you're used to playing games online. Like our attention and our social interaction has gone beyond our current environment. So then students find themselves isolated. And we know, more than anything else, success comes from that cooperative engagement, that cooperative play. I would often tell students, like, what's the difference? What do you think the difference is between Harvard and whatever school I'm working at? Faculty is the same, the buildings are the same, it even has the same lousy lunch, right? And everyone laughs and that kind of thing. And I'll say, but what they know at the Ivy League institutions is networking allows for success for everyone involved. Why not co-op? Why not build a party, build a guild, get people together? Because together we're stronger than we are individually, and we can go a lot further together. And again, that is a very weirdly alien idea. And I think that comes out of somewhat from K through 12, where you start off with these big giant round tables where everyone as a kid sits together and you have, friends at that table. And then eventually, as you go through to senior year, the table continues to shrink. And then you get to college and you have this like 2-inch by 2-inch board on a metal rod. And that's supposed to be where, you do all your work, and you're separated from everybody else. And you're like, now that you're individuals, and now that you're separated, and now that you're working on your own, just know that cooperatively you need to do that in order to be successful in the professional world. You're just like, wow, but we don't teach that. We don't educate on that.
Yeah, well, and it also develops a sense of, maybe this is a broader cultural context, but a sense of competition with one another, right, too, right? Where you don't want to maybe reach out to that other person because you're almost trying to do better than them. So, and again, tabletop games oftentimes encourage collaboration, encourage engagement, help maybe break down that stereotype to help people see that they can be more successful when they're working with a partner instead of by themselves.
Excellent. So you've worked with a number of students, a number of classes, and you've run this throughout. What's been the feedback from the students? What are they saying to you? What's that kind of response? Because I'm sure, at least initially, this has to be foreign, crazy, odd, difficult, weird, nerdy, and I don't know if I want to be part of this. But after they go through that process and they go through the gamification of all of it, how do they come out the other side?
I think it's been really positive.
That's great.
There was definitely apprehension at the start from many of the students. In our first run of this, we informed the students ahead of time coming into that they would be participating. And so there was a way to essentially opt out of our class because many of the students who are enrolled are there because they have to as part of their academic success plan, meaning that them and their AP advisor sat down together and crafted this and said, okay, you have to take this class as part of the conditions of academic probation. So that maybe lack of willingness at the start led to apprehension of like, I don't know how I feel about this. But in my experience, even in our experimental one and then the one the following semester, by the end of it, students are loving it. They want to do more. In fact, I think it kind of inspired this idea from us where the course we teach is a quarter class, meaning it just runs either in the first half or the second half of the semester. But that first semester one, students by the end of it were saying, can we keep doing this? Wait, the class is over. And so that made us think, okay, is there a way where we can expand the course to perhaps a full year to continue this? Because by the time you get to that 6th, 7th week, we've figured it out. We're through the, the storming, norming, that whole group, framework, and they're ready to go and they just want to keep doing it. And so by that point, it's like, same, we want to keep going and keep playing. So I think again, started off a little concerning with some of the students, but by the end, I think even the one student from my class this past spring, she was very apprehensive at the start, like got the whole eye roll of, well, why am I doing this? But by the end, she was the one like, oh, that was the last quest? We're done? Wait, what do you mean the class is over now? So very successful, I think, on that front.
Yeah, and you could really see how, like Andrew just referred to there, first weeks of class, we had to call on people, right? Okay, does anyone want to volunteer to be at the table? And we had, I think, in our class, one person who was familiar with D&D already, so they were excited to play, right? They wanted to dive in. The rest of them, we basically had to either literally roll to see who were calling up or volunteer people that they're playing.
Yes.
But by the end, we had to say, last week or two, it's like, well, wait a minute. You played the last 2 or 3 weeks. Let's make sure one other person gets in here. So that was a really exciting opportunity. And I think we'll talk probably a little bit later in the conversation about how we're continuing to grow and develop this into hopefully bigger and even more exciting offerings where we can expand out to a year-long opportunity. But it was great to see the students grow and develop through it from that initial hesitation to now I'm excited and I want to play this every week and break down those barriers, sometimes those stereotypes of what tabletop gameplay is, what D&D is as well. So it was an awesome experience.
Yeah, they definitely became more and more excited as the quarter went on, as the semester went on. And I would say that for anyone interested in trying this kind of gamification and game-based learning in your classes, really just embrace like the nervousness and the awkwardness, embrace the silliness of it at the start. And I think that one thing that really helped our students to get engaged was when we started combat, because our very first session, there really wasn't any combat. And I think it was trickier for students who are new to Dungeons and Dragons. It was trickier to figure out the social dynamic. What can I say? What can I do in these social situations? By the second session, when we got them in an actual combat encounter, they were really embracing the fun of like taking out these goblins. So I would get them into a combat encounter, at least a simple, easy one early on to get them to be more excited about the game.
It's wonderful, especially again, there's a certain level of stigmatization coming in, and I'm sure maybe even a little bit of that from the, your administrative executive people who are taking and going, what are you doing with this? And we're building this into a course and we're labeling things as a course. And then obviously, like you mentioned, the students come in, they're just like, I don't think so. And then ironically, those are the ones that come out the other side like, this was amazing. This is transformative. Because again, when you talk about this kind of stuff with role-playing games, you have a certain population that are just like, it'll work for these people. And then my experience, I think for so many people out there, it tends to work for the people that you least think would really gravitate to it. And that's always been such a wonderful experience to see that.
Well, and Chris, I'll just add in here that, you had mentioned sometimes it might be difficult to convince administration.
Yes.
That was not the case on our campus. I had a separate meeting with our institutional research regarding some early alert stuff. And I'd mentioned this idea that, 2 of my colleagues and I were planning on teaching this class with some D&D elements. And as soon as she heard that, she went, wait, what are you doing? That's so fascinating. My children are actually really into this. And next thing you know, it had spiraled into this is a really fun, exciting opportunity. And I think as an institution, we need to be doing more things like this, not just D&D, but thinking outside the box of a generation where we're past the what is it called? I'm blanking on it, the educational gap, that we've hit the demographic cliff, right? Of enrollment at this point. So we need to think outside the box of ways to engage students. And this is one that inspired, I think, some people on our campus to think differently.
That's wonderful. Because again, I think we all share the same perspective and philosophy, is that we want to meet students where they're at. And we want to see what they need from us. And I think historically, advisement work and even classroom work, as far as like, I have to get this material to you because it's important. And like, yes, that's true. But again, you have to meet them where they're at. Otherwise, they're not going to take it in. And then how is this working for you? And we can't deny the fact that fandom has, kind of replaced the canon as far as how we talk about ourselves and how we talk about the world. And then experiential educational kind of component where I am engaging and interacting, and not this very flat Socratic method where you talk at me and I talk back at you, and hopefully somebody in the back row got it for some reason, even though they weren't part of it. So that collaborative education is essential, and really it's what we're moving towards in higher ed as well.
Yeah, and there were a lot of different elements that went into initially designing the course, and again, we've had a couple different iterations of it since then.
Yes.
One of the big challenges I know we initially faced, and it wasn't really, kind of the approval and support, because that was all on board, and we're lucky enough that we have a lot of autonomy and control in kind of running and developing this class. But first, one of the initial challenges was, okay, well, what system do we use? And D&D is very rules heavy.
Yes.
A lot of stuff that goes in there. This is a quarter course. We have 12 to 14 meeting times. We can't spend 3 weeks just teaching the class. We're only meeting for an hour each. So, we made some decisions, some executive decisions. We basically had pre-generated characters. We limited the type of actions and abilities that you could do. Really, the goal was, let's use the game as that delivery tool. And we're playing the game. We're not missing out on that. We're still having fun with it. But it was more about how can we reinforce the learning there. So that was really important for us to know that was a challenge, but we found an opportunity around it, which was exciting, I think.
I mean, it's also a great opportunity, whatever you're teaching, that other faculty or advisors can kind of pick up. I know one of our colleagues, Dr. Will Nation, who is a counselor at Johns Hopkins University, he uses RPGs in his group therapy stuff. So if a student would have went into your class, learned the basic elements of RPG stuff, and then is able to kind of pick up on it in other places, I think that's obviously very helpful for them, kind of engaging.
Yeah, the other big thing that we had to really grapple with was this idea that if we're playing for half the time, that means that's 6 or 7 less classes of lecture, of
Yes.
assignments. So it really forced us, and I think this is a good thing actually, to look at, well, what are we teaching? What is the most important, essential information that the students have to get that's going to most help them and support them as they're on that road to academic recovery? Can we then identify other ways, whether it's in the take-home assignments and the material that they're producing? And Sean Willer would be the expert here, again, as that primary instructor where he can speak the most to the actual material that went into it there. But really making sure that everything we do, there's no wasted space, there's no wasted time, because we're only going to have so many actual content delivery days. But the other part is going to be then they're going to have their content practice or their content demonstration days where they're then showing their mastery and understanding of the knowledge. So I think that's just as important, that we're not just talking, but they're engaging.
Well, really, I think it would be a good opportunity for Andrew to expand on, because he really simplified the D&D components even further than what David and I did and what we did with our experimental section. Because again, like, you really have to think, what is the purpose of the class? What are the learning objectives? The learning objectives are not to learn the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons. I know, Andrew, you can talk about this, but you really stripped out all of the Dungeons and Dragons, like the minutia of the rule book, to just like, okay, everybody has like 20 hit points, and it really wasn't even D&D
I
at that
took
point.
essentially as
right?
of the three of us, I'm the least experienced with Dungeons and Dragons. So I went into this also thinking like, okay, I don't feel as comfortable
Yes.
watching the master David get into all of these characters and truly become like this role playing expert, which was fantastic to see. So I was a little cautious going into it, not being as familiar with the minute details and everything. So I stripped away a lot of that and created essentially just like a playthrough guide. So a little slideshow presentation, gave the students what the task was, kind of following along with what dice they needed to roll, how to interact throughout the gameplay. And then that allowed me to kind of walk around the room as they interacted in these smaller groups and help them out. So they were leading themselves through gameplay with me to provide clarification. And that helped a lot of ways in classroom management. So again, people out there who are thinking about doing something like this, it's a difficult classroom management activity for sure. So anything you can do to simplify that and make it easier is going to help you as the instructor. But the other element too was it allowed the students to be engaged. When we first ran the classes, David mentioned, Sean or David was kind of DMing at the center with this fishbowl around. And for the students in the center, it was great. But for the students in the fishbowl, they were missing out. They weren't as engaged. And remember, the goal of this was to increase engagement. So if we had a whole part of the class that was not engaged, kind of defeated the purpose.
Yes.
This forced everyone to be engaged. Everyone was an active participant. They had to, take turns, whether it was combat or just kind of role playing through the dialogue that I had them, share. Oh, you roll this. If it's a 10 or above, you have to talk about this. If it's less than that, you have to talk about this. So it kind of forced them to be engaged in the type of conversations we were hoping for them to have.
That's fantastic. So obviously you've done a lot of work. You've run this in a lot of classes. There's been a lot of iterations of this. There's been a lot of research. There's been a lot of feedback. Obviously, you came to the conference. You produced the paper. It's in our academic journal number 2. So what's next, both for all of you, personally, professionally? What are you hoping to do with tabletop gaming in academia going forward?
Well, I will continue in my Star Wars class having the what I call Star Wars game night, where we bring in tabletop games surrounding Star Wars, is more of a community builder. So it is less academic focused,
Yes.
and more on getting students to, as you said earlier, Chris, we want them interacting with one another, less isolation, more community building. And what's been fantastic about my Star Wars game night is that while I teach a class of somewhere between 19 to 22, 23 students this semester because I bumped my numbers up. But I've had more than 30 students show up each night. And so for a random night during the semester talking about Star Wars, the fact that I'm able to get 30 unique students to show up to
Yeah.
something like that shows that there's a desire for things like this. And so while it might not necessarily be academic per se in how I'm utilizing it, I'm creating a community, and I'm sure that's leading to better academic outcomes because you're creating friends who then become your study mates and who then lead you to, oh, you're interested in this. Well, I'm also interested in that. And it can lead to networking, as we talked about earlier. So I'm very much looking forward to this fall semester and my next Star Wars game night.
Chris, Andrew's selling himself a little bit short here as well. I'm going to shout him out for one more thing, which I've been observing all summer long. Andrew and I, we've instructed together, or tabled together rather, a couple of our orientation programs over the summer. And almost without fail, when we have orientation program days, he rocks one of his really nice Star Wars shirts that's got a little character of the creatures on it. We do our tabling. He brings some Star Wars stickers. And every single tabling session, I see several students that walk up to him, look at his shirt. Oh, you're the Star Wars guy. And it's developing an instant sense of belonging for these students. It's amazing, right? You hear, you see parents and the students together getting excited about that. So they instantly have that connection with him. They're
Yes.
probably going to be seeking him out in the fall, and that's getting those students excited. And again, it's that thinking outside of the box, right? Diving into the fandoms, the things we're really excited about or passionate about. And if that's one more connection and engagement with a faculty member, with a staff member on campus that these students can lean into, I have to imagine that they're going to be more motivated and more successful in this fall semester, knowing that there's someone who they can see themselves represented and they're excited to engage with.
100%.
He's doing great work on that front.
Wonderful.
Thank you, David.
As for myself, I'm wearing my Barbara Shinneman Summer Scholars Sheldon Institute shirt today.
Yes.
I am on my final day today of a D&D summer camp for kids.
Nice.
So I've been working with 10 to 14-year-olds, functionally teaching them how to play D&D. I'm calling it Dungeons and Discovery because each day as we play as well, I'm trying to develop or teach them various soft skills, various social skills as well. So talk about things like teamwork, persistence, problem solving, going through a couple of dungeon puzzles, combat situations with them, and really helping them both to hopefully develop a love of the game, but also how can we then apply some of these skills to our everyday life. So sometimes I'll go over with them, well, what happens when maybe we get a bad grade or we struggle or we get upset or frustrated with something? Do we just give up? No, we persist, right? You might get knocked out, but you can roll those death saves, pick yourself back up, and get right back into the fight as well. So that's been exciting for me. And then continuing with this, I'm actually very privileged and lucky that myself, along with my one of my colleagues, Justin Dickerson, who is our director of orientation, he's the DM in the group that I play with every week, just kind of for fun. We're actually teaching a section of one of our courses on campus. GST stands for General Studies 109. The course title is Who Do You Think You Are? And it's all a self-exploratory course of identity, self-reflection, and we're actually going to be using D&D to explore that class as well. So similar to what we did in our academic recovery class, each week we'll be teaching one concept on maybe, well, how did you get to be who you are today? What are various challenges, oppressions, difficulties, struggles? How do you walk through that? And even almost a little bit of a student development theory lens, but also just self-identity, self-reflection to better understand where you're going in life. And then having them compare and contrast that with the characters they develop. If your character acts differently than you, why is that? Why is that character you're making? Why is Grashnek the orc barbarian? Why is he deciding to approach things with an angry fist, where you're going to approach it more with your words and your grace? So hopefully through that compare and contrast, they can think about those things as well. And what I'm excited about with this is that this is actually a general education course for us as well. So we have a broad group of students from all across different curriculums, different majors, different programs. They're excited to be in the class. We have 20 people enrolled for the fall semester. So we have our plans in place as well for splitting up the groups, for hopefully engaging with that many students as well, which will be our big challenge, is large groups play the game. But I think it's an exciting opportunity. Hopefully we continue to build off of that to see where that takes us as well.
Wonderful.
As for myself, and hopefully my crummy internet holds off for a moment here, I've been using Dungeons and Dragons in my English classes. I also teach in our English and creative writing department. And so what I've been doing is assigning short stories for our students to read, but we also play through a D&D scenario that takes place in the world of that short story. So for example, I've been using some of the common classics from the literary canon, like Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, famous short story. A lot of people have read that in middle school,
Yes.
high school. And so there's this famous moral dilemma at the end where the town participates in this mass ritualistic sacrifice of one of their townsfolk because they believe it brings them better harvests and things like that. So I insert our students into the world of the short story to see how they would react. Would they participate, hopefully not, in the sacrifice, or would they find a way to save this person? And my students did decide to save the victim and run away with her in the end. So then my students write about the differences that they've identified between how do the themes of the story change or stay the same when we either read it as intended by the author or we play through it as a custom D&D scenario. So I found that to be a really fascinating use of Dungeons and Dragons to see how fictional scenarios would play out differently if we actually put our students in the roles of the characters of the short story. So that's one thing I've been doing. I'll also just give a couple of other quick shout outs. In September, I'm presenting at the Pop CRN conference. They have a conference focused on food and pop culture, and I'm talking about Dungeons and Dragons and different class disparities and class dynamics at play based on some of the material costs of different spells. So, for example, there's this one spell called Hero's Feast, which to cast it, you have to sacrifice a gold gem-encrusted bowl, which is worth 1,000 gold points, and only feeds 12 people. So I talk about who has access to food-related magic in the world of Dungeons and Dragons and who doesn't have access to that magic. And then one other thing, maybe David can talk about this in case my internet cuts out again, but we're also co-authoring a paper for a collection on fungal horror. And again, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're looking at the myconid species in D&D, which are these mushroom people, and how they kind of subvert expectations of horror and how we typically associate horror with fungus and mushrooms and mold and things like that. But the myconids are actually a very peaceful people. I don't know if David wants to expand on that, but that's some of the things that I'm working on.
Yeah. I mean, I'll first say, check out Sean's what is a Substack or something you have. I know you have a thing as well, Control Alt Decay, where he posted.
Yeah,
about
I've started blogging recently.
Yeah, but so he has that. And we disagree on Hero's Feast. I think it can be a net good if it saves you from the BBEG trying to destroy the world. But we're working on that paper, looking at myconids, how it subverts those tropes of fungal horror there as well. What's really been exciting for me is I use this as an opportunity to almost look at the history of myconids, how they've evolved and grown over time, common things that have stuck with their society and culture, even a little bit how the artwork has depicted them as well. Sean then is going to be leaning a little bit more heavily into, and he's doing great work with this, leaning more heavily into what are some of our cultural norms and expectations about fungi, about what different cultures say about them as well. Why do we sometimes have a fear of them or aversion, things of that nature? So hopefully we're going to be exploring that. We're still putting things together, but fingers crossed that'll be turning out well. I think it's a cool opportunity.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's really great to hear all the different aspects and how it's growing. And again, I think it's so very important. I mean, Sean was talking about this a little bit earlier about utilizing literature and the canon, the text that we kind of grew up with and we were educated on, that a lot of students, in my experience working with them, do feel that the world is prescribed a certain way that they need to act, think, and present. And then by giving them that kind of role play kind of experience where they could try a different ending, they could try to be a different type of person, they could try to present themselves or represent themselves differently, which is always what colleges and universities always promote. This is your opportunity to grow and expand, expand and learn and be more than you are and go into a profession and be a leader in a community. Like all of that stuff innately is in higher education. But I think we've missed out over the, couple of years here or there. So I'm really so fascinated and grateful that you're all bringing it back. All right, with that said, let's talk about the next opportunity to do all that growth and expansion at the third annual Board Game Academic Conference, which will be happening at the Strong National Museum of Play, where you'll have an opportunity to meet wonderful, profound academics as our guests here are today, and so many other people. So everyone, you got a chance to take a look at our upcoming schedule. Obviously, we're going to be playing with games at the museum. We're going to be meeting with the Game Manufacturers Association. We're going to be demoing a lot of new games that are prototype forms that are coming in. But what are you looking forward to? What of your colleagues are presenting that you would love to sit in for?
Looking here at the list of presentations, I think I'm most excited because it aligns with the work that we're doing is the leveraging gameplay for cognitive skill development and active learning, the educational potential of the 9 tiles, extreme and similar
Yes.
lightweight board games. Shout out to Jenny Wing for that from Columbia University. I think, that sounds like regardless of the population that you're working with, in this case, our work is with academic probation students. There are ways in which to engage cognitively through gameplay, which I'm sure lots of things from that session will be relevant to our future work as well.
Yeah, for me, probably no surprise here. I was just talking about how the class I'm going to be teaching in the fall is going to be one of our general education courses. So I was really excited to see a role-playing games, a gen ed and understanding culture discussion from Stephanie Hedge at Illinois Springfield. I think that could be really awesome to consider, especially how at other institutions, how is general education being utilized, what opportunities are out there already existing. Maybe something I can adapt a little bit into what we're looking at. So I'd love to hear about that research and what they're exploring.
Yeah, there's really a lot of cool presentations that I'm excited for related to our work. Once again, Gamification as an Educational Tool by Christopher Rondeau. I apologize if I butcher any names. But personally, I'm also really intrigued by Endgame, Playing and Dying by Dr. Laura Davies and Dr. Emma Ray. That just sounds really fascinating. I'm assuming that it's going to delve into theories and philosophy of death and dying, and I'm just really interested in what that turns out like.
Yeah, a lot of these presentations that you've all mentioned, we've actually done interviews with them, so you could check out some of the more of that background information, like the one specifically about death and dying, which is very interesting. I think really fits into all of your work. Is what are the culture and philosophy around death and dying, and then how do you create a kind of tabletop kind of role play experience where you can engage with the materials. Again, it's not about successfully in this case overcoming death and dying, but it's the engagement that's essential, and the engagement is always what we're looking for, and obviously what you've done in your paper too. So again, there's so much to talk about here. Again, David, Andrew, Sean, thank you so much for joining us here this week. If you would like to learn more about their work, obviously BoardGameAcademics.com in our journal number 2 has their scholarship, but we will have additional links to their information in the show notes. So please check those out so you can connect with all of these people here or at the upcoming convention. And don't forget, a lot of stuff that's upcoming on the website and after the convention as well. So until next time, thank you, everyone. Keep rolling and thinking critically. Take care, everybody.